Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. My name's Theo Marin, and I sell weapons. Not the kind that show up on slick promotional flyers or gun store shelves, but the kind you never talk about in polite company. I'm not a criminal, I just work in grey areas. You could call me an arms dealer, though these days I've cleaned up. Mostly, I've worked with private security firms, contractors overseas, even a few law enforcement supply chains when they needed things yesterday and didn't ask too many questions. I live in Phoenix, Arizona, where the heat bakes everything hard and dry, and nobody asks why your truck has steel lockboxes welded into the bed. The first real sign of trouble came before dawn on a Monday, July 15th, 2025. I was up early, pacing my warehouse off North 19th Avenue. The building's a squat tan thing with faded paint, right near the industrial corridor. My shop was legal on paper, Marin Security Logistics, specializing in asset protection solutions. But in the back room, behind a false wall triggered by a biometric pad, was the real vault. That morning, I was taking stock. I'd just landed a shipment out of Nogales, 5 crates of surplus Israeli TAR-21 bullpups, brand new in their foam cases, along with a box of Magpul P-Mags and sealed tins of 5.56 x45 MTAG and Insum MM 855 green tips. No sooner had I closed the lid on the last crate than my phone lit up. Not a call, not a text, but an emergency push alert from the Arizona Department of Health Services. Statewide advisory, widespread reports of severe neurological illness. All citizens urged to shelter in place until further notice. Do not engage with infected individuals. Law enforcement is responding. More information to follow. I stared at it for a full minute. Then came the second alert, this one from the CDC, overriding every app and pushing a black screen with bold white text. Biohazard level 4, neuropathic contagion. Quarantine zones have been established in Los Angeles, Las Vegas, and El Paso. Estimated R0, 12, 18. Transmission, blood, saliva, airborne particulate, pending verification. Symptoms, acute aggression, loss of higher function, catatonia. Avoid infected at all cost. I felt a pressure building in my chest. I've worked with people who survived biological weapon drills. One old client of mine, Samir, spent 5 years transporting containment gear in Syria. I remember him telling me once, the moment you see a level 4 alert, you leave. Don't think, don't pack, you go. And yet I didn't leave. Instead, I locked my warehouse, shut off the perimeter lights, and climbed up to the roof to listen. Phoenix was silent. No traffic, no aircraft overhead, no distant hum of city life. Just the occasional dog barking, then stopping, like something shut it up mid-yelp. At 6:12 a.m., I saw the first one. A man staggering across the empty parking lot outside the warehouse complex. He wore slacks and a torn blue polo shirt. Bank of America name tag still clipped to his collar, blood down the front of his shirt, eyes wild and unfocused. He moved like he was drunk, but there was something worse. Erratic speed bursts, sudden jerks of movement. I drew my sidearm, a CZ P10C I kept holstered in a quick-release drop leg rig, and watched him from behind the HVAC duct. He wasn't alone. 6 more followed. One of them, a woman in what looked like scrubs, was barefoot and bleeding from the mouth. Another wore a state trooper's tan uniform, his left arm bent backward at the elbow like it had no bones left. They didn't move in a pack, not at first, but when a siren wailed somewhere near West Peoria Avenue, they all turned and sprinted toward the sound. Fast. Too fast for people with injuries like that. I ducked back inside and bolted the rooftop access door behind me. I wasn't ready to accept what was happening, but I wasn't about to get caught off guard either. The vault room was already sealed. I opened it using the retinal scanner, then powered up the LED panels lining the ceiling. Row after row of locked drawers, crates, cases, and racks came into view. Everything was sorted. Military surplus on the left, civilian grade on the right, and my custom order shelves along the back. I did what any rational person in my position would do. I started building a loadout. I packed a USMC issue plate carrier with level IV ceramic plates, 6 double mag pouches, a utility blade, trauma kit, and hydration bladder. I selected a Daniel Defense Mk18 SBR, 10.3-inch barrel, quad rail handguard, and EOTech XPS-3 optic with a G33 magnifier. Chambered in 5.56, suppressed. I loaded 10 mags. Then I grabbed my Beretta 1301 tactical shotgun, loaded it with 12-gauge Fiocchi buck, and slung it over my back. For sidearm redundancy, I holstered a Glock 17 with a TLR-1 HL weapon light. No flashy movie gear, just practical. I had no illusions of surviving on bravado. I wasn't a hero. I'd spent years making money off others who fought in deserts and jungles. But I knew gear. I knew logistics, and I knew this was going to get worse before it got better. At 7:04 AM, my building's power cut out. Not a flicker, total blackout. The backup generator in the basement auto-started, kicking on emergency systems, lighting, security cameras, and network uplinks. But my Wi-Fi was dead. Cellular signal dropped to 1 bar and then vanished entirely. EMP? No. That would have fried more than just cell towers. Likely just an overload. Too many people trying to call 911 at once. Infrastructure collapse begins with communication. I checked the security monitors. Camera feeds around the perimeter showed shadows moving between buildings. Dozens now, more than 24 in the north lot. Someone ran out of one of the nearby auto repair shops. A young guy looked like a mechanic. Blue jumpsuit, tool belt still on. He was fast, smart too. He zigzagged, made distance. He almost made it to the chain link fence behind the warehouse. Then he was pulled down. I saw 6 or 7 of them dogpile him. The feed pixelated as the generator switched phase, but I could hear the sounds through the audio mic. Not screams, not at first. The tearing, the wet sounds, then screaming, then silence. It took everything I had not to vomit. That was when someone banged on my loading bay door. Hard. 3 quick strikes, metal on metal. Then a voice, sharp, female, shouting through the steel. If you don't open this door, I'm going to die out here. I hesitated. Was it a trick? Was she infected? I sprinted down to the reinforced hatch and checked the peephole. A woman, mid-30s, 30s, light tactical gear, carrying what looked like a SIG MCX rifle with a loopholed optic. She had a radio clipped to her shoulder and a US Marshal's badge on her belt. She turned, fired a 3-round burst at something behind her, then slammed her back to the door again. Let me in, or I swear to God I popped the lock and yanked the hydraulic lever. She rolled inside just as 2 of the infected slammed into the door behind her. I hit the lever again and the bay slammed shut, crushing one of their hands in the gap. The fingers twitched, then snapped clean off. The Marshal lay on the concrete floor, breathing hard, rifle across her chest. "Name's Keller," she said between gulps of air. "Deputy US Marshal. I need your help. You have weapons. I have a radio. We have to get out of Phoenix before sundown. This thing is spreading faster than anyone predicted." She sat against the cinder block wall beneath the breaker panel, rifle balanced on her lap. Her knuckles were bruised, one arm showing scrapes under a torn sleeve. Dust coated her body armor, and there was a fresh streak of blood on her left boot, but it didn't seem to be hers. I kept my distance, pistol low but ready, watching her closely for signs of infection. "Define help," I said, my voice even, "and tell me how you knew I had weapons." "I ran with the fugitive task force out of Tucson until yesterday," she replied, still catching her breath. "We had a man in Phoenix, ex-mile contractor, gone dark last night. I looked into his contacts. You popped on his comms logs. Unregistered encrypted traffic between your number and 3 separate gun club operators over the last month. That's not standard dealer chatter. I didn't respond. She wasn't wrong. I moved a lot of high-end gear to people with skeletons in their closets. Folks who didn't post reviews or sign receipts. She pushed herself upright. Look, I don't care what side gig you ran. I'm not here to haul you in. My marshal badge means exactly nothing right now. But my radio's still tied into the DHS emergency net. We've got a narrow window to make it to the Sky Harbor staging zone before they seal it off. I nodded slowly. Sky Harbor's 12 miles southeast. With the freeway gridlocked and half the city turning feral, you think we'll walk it? She stepped forward, eyes scanning the racks lining the wall behind me. I was hoping you had wheels and something that doesn't run on dreams and factory paint. I gestured toward the vault. Come on, let's gear up. We'll talk plans after I know you're not carrying any bites or scratches. Inside the vault, the LED panels buzzed to life as we stepped past the biometric lock. Keller paused to glance over the rows of equipment, her expression equal parts impressed and relieved. This wasn't your average prepper stash. I had modular weapon systems, infrared optics, thermal monoculars, encrypted Baofeng handhelds, and crates of NATO standard ammo stacked by caliber. She stripped off her vest, peeled her shirt up to show a ribcage bruised from impacts but free of wounds. Then she rolled her sleeves and turned her legs. No bites, no broken skin, just dirt, sweat, and exhaustion. All right, I said. We move in a 2-vehicle convoy. I've got a lifted Ram 3500 in the garage, diesel, full fuel bladder in the bed, reinforced grille, bed rack with mounted Pelican cases. Behind it is a Polaris MRZR, light recon frame, Kevlar reinforced tires, 7.62 mount rail. If we lose the truck, we switch to the ATV and stay mobile. Keller raised her eyebrows. You prepped for war or retirement? Same thing if you do it right, I said, grabbing a hard case and flipping it open. Inside sat an FN Scar 17S in flat dark earth, loaded with a Leupold Mark 6 optic and Harris bipod. I handed it to her. You're going to want punch. Most of the infected drop with a headshot, but heavier calibers reduce the risk of misses. She took the rifle like she'd held one 100 times before, dropped the mag, checked the chamber, and locked it back with the bolt hold. Smooth, fast, practiced. 7.62 NATO, solid choice. While she checked over the Scar, I packed a second loadout. I stuck with the MK18, but swapped optics to a Trigicon VCOG with a 1.6x range, better for mixed environments. Added a secondary micro red dot offset at 45 degrees for tight corners. I strapped a second Glock 17 into a chest rig holster, then tossed 3 handheld radios into a dry bag, along with spare batteries, maps, and encrypted USB drives containing intel and satellite imagery from an old contracting contact. By the time the truck was ready, Keller had already found my topographical map of the metro area. She pointed to a red-circled intersection southeast of Papago Park. They're setting up triage zones at the Arizona National Guard Armory near 52nd and McDowell. That's where they'll hold out as long as they can. Choppers are ferrying personnel from there to Luke AFB if they can keep the perimeter. I didn't like it. Too exposed, too many roads, too many infected pouring out of downtown. But I kept that to myself. We loaded gear into the truck. Rifles racked to the center console. Spare mags in seatback pouches. Trauma kits under the dash. And a go bag clipped behind the driver's headrest. I threw 2 body armor vests in the cab, along with MVGs and a headlamp each. Then I popped the driver's side panel and flipped the hidden kill switch that re-engaged the starter circuit. The truck roared to life. It felt like waking up a sleeping beast. At 8:02 a.m., we rolled out of the warehouse onto 19th Avenue. Phoenix was unrecognizable. Fires burned in the distance, columns of black smoke rising near I-10. Power lines crackled and sparked from downed poles. Sirens blared in the distance, echoing off the dry air, but none of them seemed to be moving anymore, just alarms with no one left to answer them. I drove with the lights off, keeping to side streets. Keller scanned intersections through a set of Steiner binoculars, watching for movement. Twice we stopped to let a group of infected pass. Men and women sprinting barefoot down the middle of the street, covered in blood, moving like wolves chasing a scent trail. "They're hunting," she whispered as we watched them vanish between houses. "Not just wandering, they're following something." "How long since this started?" I asked. Keller tapped her radio. "Best intel I heard was an infection vector that hit in Los Angeles 5 days ago. Some black site bio-research facility on the outskirts, off the I-5. The first cases weren't bites. They were patients bleeding from the eyes, violent psychotic breaks. CDC containment teams moved in 2 days later, but by then the infection had already jumped vectors, spread to Vegas, El Paso, San Diego. Phoenix was supposed to have another 24 hours. We turned onto Camelback Road and found a barricade built from trash bins and abandoned sedans. Behind it, a handful of civilians, maybe 6 or 7, stood holding whatever they had. A hunting rifle, a baseball bat. One guy had a fire axe. They flagged us down, stepping into the street. "Don't stop," I said. Keller hesitated. "They're not infected." "No, but they're desperate." Still, she rolled her window down a crack. "You armed?" A man stepped forward. 2 hunting rifles, 1 handgun. "We got kids. They're scared. We need to know what's happening." Keller looked at me. I sighed and handed her a shrink-wrapped pack of bottled water from the back seat. "Toss it." She lobbed it through the window. "Head east. Look for military presence near the National Guard Armory. Stick to groups. Avoid isolated buildings. If anyone starts acting off, paranoia, aggression, tremors, quarantine them." They nodded, said thank you. We kept driving. As we neared 7th Avenue, the traffic jam became impassable. Abandoned vehicles lined both sides of the road, some with their doors open, some with shattered windows. A Tesla with blood smeared across its inside windshield sat crooked across 2 lanes, flashers still blinking. We got out and switched to the MRZR. It was lighter, quieter, and agile enough to squeeze through alleyways and pedestrian paths. Keller took the mounted 7.62 upper, locking in a 50-round drum, while I drove. The route through Papago Park was where everything went sideways. Just before the trailhead, we saw smoke rising from the buttes. A white DHS UH-60 helicopter had gone down in the gravel flats behind the amphitheater. Tail snapped, rotor blades mangled. No movement. Keller signaled to stop. We crept forward through the brush. MRZR parked behind a sandstone outcrop. I covered the vehicle while she approached the wreck. Then the screaming started. Not from the chopper, from below. A man in body armor ran out from a tunnel entrance beneath the rock ledge. His hands covered in blood, wild-eyed, screaming. "They're in the vents, they're..." Before something tackled him from behind. A blur of motion. Teeth, blood, bones snapping. I raised my rifle and sighted in, but Keller had already fired. 2 quick bursts from the scar tore through the infected spine and upper neck, flipping it off the downed man like a rag doll, but it was too late. The bite had landed. I didn't need to check a pulse to know he was done. The man twitched on the ground, choking on blood, trying to push himself up with ruined hands. He had minutes at best. The marshal didn't hesitate. 1 clean shot to the head. No ceremony, no last words, just practicality. That was the difference between survivors and corpses now. Hesitation would get you killed. We backed off, covering the cave entrance. It was one of those stormwater access tunnels, circular, concrete-lined, barely 5 feet tall. Metal utility covers ran along the walls, many pried open. It made sense now, how the infected had gotten so deep into Phoenix so fast. They weren't all using the roads. They were spreading through the infrastructure, water tunnels, maintenance corridors, air ducts. Everything that cities were built on was now a highway for death. From inside the tunnel came movement, scuffling, then a distant shriek that echoed with unnatural reverb. Not a human voice, not anymore. Keller looked at me. "We have to move, now. They'll swarm. We sprinted for the MRZR. I dropped into the driver's seat. Keller already turning the 7.62 upper back toward the cave mouth. More infected emerged. Fast, low to the ground, filthy, crawling on all fours with bones at unnatural angles. They scrambled up the rock face like spiders. One launched toward us just as I slammed the pedal and tore across the gravel flats. The ride was rough, dry desert washouts, scattered boulders, collapsed hiking trail fencing, but the vehicle held. The Kevlar tires and light frame bounced over debris as we banked south toward the Papago golf course. I aimed for the paved path along the canal. It was partially fenced, but we could cut through and use it to bypass the worst of the roadblocks. Behind us, the infected chased for 100 yards before dropping off. A few kept running for longer. One even kept pace for far too long, until its legs simply gave out and it collapsed into a heap, still twitching. We didn't speak for a while. The wind, the engine, the pulse in my ears. It was all too loud. When we reached the water treatment plant near the Salt River, we stopped under a pedestrian overpass to regroup. I cracked open a canteen, handed Keller a protein bar and pulled out the radio. Static. Then a faint tone, followed by a scratchy voice. Sky Harbor is compromised. Repeat. Staging area is no longer secure. Redirecting survivors to fallback zone. Camp Talon. Coordinates incoming. The transmission repeated, then cut out with a digital beep. Keller looked at me. Camp Talon. I nodded. That's military code for one of their interim response bases. Mobile units, probably set up at a highway off-ramp or a stadium. Short-term triage and exfil. We waited for the GPS burst, and a few seconds later, my encrypted radio pinged with a data packet. I opened the file. Camp Talon was listed as 33.2938 degrees N, 111.9578 degrees W. I recognized the area immediately. South Mountain Park. They'd chosen the old National Guard firing range near Central Avenue and Alta Vista. High ground, limited access, long sight lines. It made sense tactically, but the terrain between here and there was a mess of suburban sprawl, narrow roads and bottlenecks. We go south through Tempe, I said. Loop west past Guadalupe, cut through the desert trails, then circle in from the east slope. The MRZR can handle it if we stay light. Keller glanced at the fuel gauge, still at 60%, enough to get there. Maybe. We moved again. As we passed through Tempe's residential fringe, things got worse. Cars jammed the intersections. Bodies lay on lawns. Some doors hung open. Others were barricaded with furniture. Several streets had hand-painted warnings. Infected inside, no help here, do not open. At one intersection near Broadway and Hardy, a city bus sat tilted on a fire hydrant, its side ripped open like a can. Inside, dark shapes twitched. One slammed against the window as we passed, bloated, bloodied, jaw unhinged. We didn't slow down, but the worst came at the overpass near I-10. The military had tried to hold the line there. Sandbag walls, burned out Humvees, dozens of shell casings, blood trails everywhere. But no bodies, just signs of a retreat or a rout. We pulled up to one of the vehicles and saw what was left of the crew. 2 Marines, slumped in the back of a light armoured transport. Helmets still on, rifles empty. One had been bitten on the neck. The other had a self-inflicted wound under the chin. Clean. Mercy. Keller took their dog tags without a word. I grabbed an M240B off the mount and checked the belt feed, still loaded. I slung it across the rack in case we needed real firepower later. We pushed on. The closer we got to South Mountain, the quieter it became. No sirens, no helicopters, just the crunch of tires on gravel and the distant howl of wind through the saguaros. By 10:45 a.m., we were within half a mile of Camp Talon. That's when we saw the flares. Orange smoke billowed near the ridge, signalling a perimeter breach. We parked the MRZR in a dry wash and moved on foot, weapons ready, NVGs flipped up on our helmets, eyes scanning the ridgeline. Door. Camp Talon was real. Modular prefab tents, solar generators, antenna arrays, and rows of sandbag emplacements. National Guard, Homeland Security, and a scattering of private contractors, all trying to keep something resembling order. A perimeter of concertina wire and elevated firing positions wrapped the camp, but it was clear they were barely holding on. Keller flashed her badge. They let us in. Inside, the mood was grim. Medics triaged patients under shade canopies. Some screamed. Others had already stopped. A line of stretchers waited for evac, but the choppers were gone. No rotor sounds. No inbound aircraft. A soldier, Captain Rosario, according to her name patch, met us near the command tent. She wore a multicam combat uniform, sleeves rolled up, M4 slung low across her chest. "Are you the one broadcasting on DHS frequency Alpha 6? Keller asked. Rosario nodded. Was, until the antenna array fried. Solar flare, they think. Comms are down across all local sectors. We've got no uplink to DC or NORAD. We're blind and running out of supplies. I stepped forward. We have gear, ammunition, tools, but if this place is falling, we're wasting time. Rosario looked like she hadn't slept in 2 days. This camp's not falling yet, but we're pulling everyone out by dusk. Evac birds coming in from Luke AFB for one final sweep. You want out of Phoenix? You've got about 7 hours. 7 hours. That's all the time we had to prep, fortify, and survive the next wave. Keller and I went to work. I handed over the encrypted USB drives, which contained terrain data and access tunnel maps I'd acquired years ago while planning a private facility install. The Army engineers cross-referenced them with sewer schematics and quickly discovered several vulnerabilities in the mountain's utility tunnels, ones the infected could use to bypass the perimeter. We reinforced those tunnels with thermite charges and pressure plates, rigged to seal the shafts if breached. I worked with 2 sappers from the 842nd Engineer Battalion, Corporal Yoon and Sergeant Trevino, both sharp, fast, and unflinchingly calm. Meanwhile, Keller ran weapons checks with Rosario's squad, making sure every rifle was zeroed and every squad had thermal optics in rotation. The infected didn't wait until dusk. They came just after 3 p.m, first in small groups, fast movers, charging the wire, testing it, sacrificing themselves to expose gaps, then more, dozens, a flood of limbs and teeth and bone surging over the ridge like a living tide. I took position on a sandbagged platform near the eastern slope, Scar locked and braced, grenades clipped to my vest, radio in my ear. Keller was down below, directing civilians into the reinforced tents, while Rosario coordinated air cover on a short-range UHF loop. The first perimeter held, the second did not. We fell back in phases, covering each other as we retreated, moving wounded, burning infected corpses to prevent contamination. The M240B I'd salvage became a centerpiece of the final defense, mounted between 2 crates of ammo, firing in long, arcing bursts that tore through the crowd like a scythe. At 4:28 p.m, the first Black Hawk appeared over the ridge. Evac had arrived, but there were only 2 birds, maybe enough space for 40 people. Keller and I didn't speak. We knew what that meant. Civilians and wounded first, soldiers next, contractors like me. We were last in line. I watched as families were loaded into the choppers, children clutching stuffed animals, parents too tired to cry anymore. Soldiers backed them in, rifles aimed outward, scanning the tree line. The sound of rotor blades chopping through hot desert air drowned out most of the screams, but you could still feel the panic, see it on every face. Some were bloody, others covered in soot. Most just looked hollow, faces evacuated of emotion, like their minds had already left their bodies hours ago. There were still people waiting by the second bird, dozens huddled behind jersey barriers, hoping their names were on a clipboard that didn't exist anymore. A medic held a young girl in his arms, blood on his gloves, asking someone in the flight crew if she counted as 1 passenger or 2. They let her on. He stayed behind. That's the part people never understand about these things. It's not about heroism or sacrifice. It's logistics, space, weight, time. Every evac has a threshold, and when that threshold is crossed, someone has to make decisions. Not moral ones, practical ones. A crew chief pointed to Keller and waved us forward. We jogged across the concrete to the Black Hawk, ducking under the spinning rotor. I could feel the downwash stinging my face with grit. Once aboard, Keller took a seat next to a boy who looked maybe 11. His arm was in a sling, face streaked with grime. He didn't speak, didn't blink, just stared at the open side door where the city burned below. I strapped in across from her, the scar wedged under my legs, and gave the crew chief a nod. "Clear," he yelled to the pilot, tapping the headset. The bird lifted, the skids pulled off the ground, and South Mountain fell away beneath us like the set of a war movie. Except this wasn't a movie, and the credits weren't coming anytime soon. The flight to Luke Air Force Base took about 18 minutes, cutting northwest over the spine of Phoenix's ruined skyline. We passed low over 7th Avenue, saw fires in every direction, entire neighborhoods in blackout. Downtown looked worse. City Hall, the county court building, and the ASU campus all showing signs of chaos. One of the freeways, the I-17, was choked solid with wrecked vehicles. The pilot stayed low, following power lines and riverbeds to avoid possible man-pads or rooftop panic fire. As we approached the base, the radio buzzed with security checks. The runway had been converted into a staging zone, with C-130S parked wing to wing. Medical tents glowing under portable floodlights, and mobile radar dishes spinning to track incoming birds. The perimeter bristled with Humvees and guardsmen in full kit. We landed hard, too fast, a little crooked, but safe. The second bird came in a minute later, then lifted again without even powering down, back toward the mountain. It wouldn't be coming back, that much was clear. An officer in desert fatigues and an OCP field cap met us on the tarmac. Name patch, Major D. Holbrook, USAF. He looked exhausted, but he still moved with the clipped urgency of a man trying to hold a dam up with his bare hands. "You two with DHS?" he asked, noting Keller's badge. "Was," she answered. "We were in contact with a Marshal Service node in Tucson until this morning. It's gone now." Holbrook didn't seem surprised. "We've lost command continuity across half the western seaboard. El Paso's dark. San Diego was overrun 2 hours ago. We're running civilian evac on 20-minute cycles, but fuel's tight and the birds are pushing redline. We're triaging out of Hangar 6. You can get checked, deconned and rearmed there. Don't expect a hot meal." We walked across the tarmac as the next wave of evacuees was herded toward temporary quarantine. The military was taking no chances. Everyone was scanned, temperature checked, and passed through decontamination sprayers. The gear I carried was hosed down and bagged for inspection. My scar went onto a metal table, along with my sidearms and magazines. I was tagged, logged, and handed a clipboard. Inside the hangar, dozens of people lay on cots, most sleeping, some trembling, and a few being restrained by medics in Tyvek suits. On one wall was a row of flat screens running surveillance footage, grid cams from major roads, drone feeds from downtown Phoenix, and static overlays from failed CDC checkpoints. One clip showed a barricade near Mesa, cracking under pressure, not figuratively, literally cracking. The infected were slamming into it until the K-rails shifted, toppling over. A man in a hazmat hood turned it off before the video finished. We were directed to a secure area with personnel lockers, a field supply depot, and a line of laptops powered by satellite link. I logged in using a burner credential I'd used on old ops. It still worked, barely. Through that connection, I pulled down a situation report coded with 3 red priority tags. Designation, Nerve 17, Neuropathic Enhanced Rabies Variant. Origin, Biogenetic Containment Failure. Classified Facility, California. Estimated vector saturation, 41% of urban centers in contact chain. Mutation phase, accelerated. R0, estimated between 14-21. Virological behavior, hyperaggression, frontal lobe degeneration, elevated pain threshold, neuro-overclocked motor response, vector expansion. Forecast, global in 72 hours without strategic intervention. There was no longer any question. This was an extinction-level threat. I stared at the data for several long minutes, thinking back to the warehouse, to the crates I'd kept in case the world ever burned. That time had come, and I still had contacts, reserves, supplies. I looked at Keller, who sat at a folding table across the hangar, scribbling notes into a green waterproof field journal while sipping electrolyte water. She glanced up and met my eyes. No words, just the unspoken understanding that we were not out of this, not even close. Holbrook approached us later with a folder. "We're forming a response unit," he said. "Not military, not formal, just people who survived day one and can still shoot straight. We've got gear, but we need ground intel. Civilians with logistics experience, contractors, operators. You interested?" Keller stood up and nodded immediately. "Yeah, we're in." I didn't even hesitate. They moved us into Barracks Delta 3, just outside the main airstrip. 27 other survivors were already assigned, mostly former service members, some National Guard stragglers, a few wildcards like me. We were briefed by a Marine colonel flown in from Camp Pendleton who wasted no time. "You're now part of Task Force Sparrow. You're not hunting infected. You're not clearing neighborhoods. You're doing recon, retrieval, and technical suppression. Whatever buys us time to keep evac running. This isn't about winning. It's about stalling collapse." That night, we were given our first assignment. Satellite comms had flagged a distress beacon from the Palo Verde nuclear generating station west of the city, one of the largest power plants in the US. It had gone dark 4 hours earlier. A failsafe should have initiated shutdown procedures automatically, but the signal stopped mid-transmission. A team had been sent, no response. Our job, go in, assess the facility's state, retrieve any surviving personnel, and determine if the reactors had been compromised. If that plant went critical, or if the infected had breached containment, well, then Phoenix wouldn't just burn, it would glow. At 0300 hours on what would technically be day 2, Keller and I stood in the loading bay of a modified C-130 outfitted for tactical insertions. We were armed, and riding with a squad of recon techs and drone pilots. The lights flickered red as the bird powered up. I looked out the side porthole, where the glow of fire still lit the city we had barely escaped. Somewhere in that chaos were the people we didn't save. But we were still breathing, still moving, and for as long as that remained true, we weren't finished. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.